Cable theft is estimated to cost the South African economy 7 billion rand annually. 2011, the copper theft barometer spiked to 20.5 million rand. This crime affects companies such as telecommunications companies, railway companies, of course, which rely heavily on cabling systems to provide their services, things like signalling. Now, we're joined by Peggy Drodsky, who is COO of SACI, Cesar Mthwetwa, who's General Manager of the Rail Network at Transnet Freight, Theo Hess, Managing Executive for Telkom Field Service, and Errol Braithwaite, General Manager of Bombela Concession Company. Of course, that's referring to the Gautrain. They'll be joining us for this discussion. Peggy, perhaps you could start the copper theft barometer. For someone to have sat down and thought about this in the first place shows what a serious problem it is, that we need a barometer for a particular commodities theft.
That's absolutely correct. In 2009, 3 of the major members of SACI came to us, Telkom, Eskom and Transnet, and they said to us, this is a really serious problem. Is there something that we can do about it? We established a working group and we decided that what we should do is establish a copper theft barometer which would track the level of copper theft and the impact that it has on a monthly basis. And the 3 organizations give us their information on which we base our copper theft barometer. Now, the interesting thing is that this is not an issue which is unique to South Africa. Almost every country in the world suffers from copper theft.
Just to pause, we've got it on the screen there now, Peggy. What is it telling us, this barometer? It looks as if things are occasionally better, occasionally worse, but certainly not getting much better.
No, it's not getting much better, but yes, it does seem to track the international cost of copper. We believe that there are syndicates that are involved, and we also believe that they are not very active if the price of copper drops.
Now, there was a story in the Star this morning as it happened. Dorado Park, suburb of Johannesburg, knocked out because someone was stealing and was electrocuted trying to steal. So there's even though the risks are there, people are still doing it.
Yes.
Perhaps I could just move to Theo, as from the Telkom perspective. I mean, you, like Transnet, have this vast network of cables. I don't know how many millions of kilometers or thousands of kilometers. How bad has the problem been for you, and is it getting better?
Well, just talking about Dorado Park, you know, over the weekend and last week we had a similar incident, and about 1,400 customers have been put out of service. But you know, looking at the area that has been focused on at the moment, you know that we've got cables deployed underground, cables deployed overhead. Overhead, of course, easily accessible, much more vulnerable. But since it's also in the eye, thieves are now resorting to the bigger cables which are underground and causing more damage. So
now,
it is seriously.
It surprises me more with the railways than with Telkom. I mean, you've not got high voltage cables where you've got your cabling. Cesar, you've got the rail network, in particular the overhead cabling on the railways. I mean, that's high. That's 25,000 volts in some cases, 3,000 volts depending on the network. It's very dangerous, even for the people who are authorized and qualified to work on these overhead cables, yet they get stolen.
Look, we've had incidents of people getting electrocuted while stealing, but most of these thieves, they're quite technical, and they know how to earth our contact wire, which is the supply cable for our trains. They're quite sophisticated in that way. We lose about 5,000 meters a month.
5,000 meters
a month, which is 5 kilometers a month on average. Down from close to 40 kilometers a month in 2010.
Good grief. Now, Errol, you talking for the Gautrain, and I want to be tough on you from the beginning. The railways were there long before copper theft started, and I'm not sure, Peggy, perhaps Peggy can tell us, when did this start? I mean, it wasn't a problem some years ago, then became a serious problem. Didn't you anticipate this with the Gautrain when you built it? Because it was already a problem when the Gautrain was thought of and built. Perhaps you've been taken by surprise by the ingenuity of these thieves.
Look, of course it was anticipated. Having said that, it's a lot easier to talk about it after the event than to solve problems up front. You know, just to give you some interesting statistics, Peggy was quite correct. This is not a South African problem. And it's not a Gautrain problem, it's not a Telkom or a Transnet problem, it's an international problem. and it's a very serious international problem. Since 2005, in the UK, the incidence of cable theft that have affected train delays has increased tenfold. It's a massive international problem.
You know what?
And if we broaden it slightly to not just copper cable theft, but metal theft, I mean, we're talking about a 5 billion rand industry just in South Africa.
Peggy,
you roll that over 5 years, that's a Gautrain built every 5 years.
Wow.
Peggy, how long has this been a problem, internationally and locally?
It's been a problem for decades. It just hasn't been addressed adequately. And I think it's because we haven't got together to have a look at how it can be done. And now what we do is we liaise very, very closely with the National Prosecutions Authority. We've got somebody on our working group who trains the investigating officers, and we've made it a more outspoken problem and brought the attention of the general population to the seriousness of the problem. Before we didn't talk about it as much.
I suppose the difficulty is you've got big networks, even the Gautrain, which is limited in geography, it's still a substantial network. The metal is easy to steal, it's relatively light compared to some other things that you could steal. However, I want to be skeptical here. It's a bit like the telephone companies, the cell phone companies. You think surely you can switch them off so that criminals wouldn't want to steal them. With all the technology available, doesn't an alarm go off when someone steals a bit of your cable, Errol?
Look, absolutely. I mean, as you know, we've done a lot to protect our cables, ranging from we're completely ring fencing our rail reserve, which is very difficult for these guys to do because it's a billion times bigger. You know, we have CCTV cameras, we've got security guards live and monitoring with cameras and detection systems. But I can tell you that, you know, I suppose those things have all been very effective. You know, the truth is we've only been affected 4 times since we've opened. But when we get affected, the impact that has on passengers is very, very serious.
And as Theo says, how many? A couple of thousand people put out by this theft the other day.
Absolutely.
Your trains all come to a halt?
Yeah. So sorry, if I may. So we have, technology is not going to be the silver bullet here. We've had about 3,000 cameras installed, CCTVs. It's a mobile crime. So you install it here, they move down by 50 kilometers, they still steal. So it's mainly what we've seen to be helping, working very closely with the law enforcing agencies. As I said, we used to lose close to about 40 kilometers a month. We're down to 5 now. We work very closely with them. And the prosecution and the conviction rate has gone up.
Well,
so there's a need to work very closely as Peter said, as an industry.
I want to differ slightly from you in the sense from a technology point of view, not being the answer. I think that's exactly the answer for Telkom as a company.
What is the answer?
Moving away from fixed line services and go mobile, go VSAT in that form. That is the answer for us, especially in the rural areas, outlying areas where theft is rife.
So in other words, you go away from fixed line because copper is the only way if you're going to have fixed line. What about
fiber optics are an option?
I want to add to that very quickly is that while your optic fiber is deployed in the same cable route that your copper cables are deployed, often in an attempt to get to the copper, the optic fiber gets damaged, and that, to his point of earlier, the impact on businesses is huge. When you ask me what is the extent in terms of monetary value, it's almost impossible to calculate.
While you're talking, we've got a graph here of exports of copper waste and scrap, which they can put up for us in a moment. Peggy, what about the cycle here? There's a criminal cycle. It's not just this guy who goes and a single person who goes and steals a bit of copper. There must be syndicates. There must be a whole market where it's processed, melted down. In what form is it moved around? That's what you've got to break. It's like drugs, isn't it?
It is like drugs, but I think we've got 2 distinct areas. We've got the bread and butter thieves who will steal a bit of copper because they want to put a loaf of bread on the table. And then we've got the large syndicates. And I think the Second-Hand Goods Act coming in has certainly had an impact. Whether that can be given the credit for the entire reduction, I don't know.
Looking at this graph that's on there now, South African exports of copper, has government got a handle on this? Has government done enough to break it, to have diplomatic relations exerted to stop exports, imports?
You know, I'm not sure about that. I don't think so. I notice Theo is smiling at me. The thing is that the cable gets put into containers, and not every single container that leaves our ports can be opened and checked.
Can dog sniffers be brought to sniff out copper? I don't know.
No, just sorry, man, to take you back a bit. When I say technology, I meant we'll always use the high copper to conduct electricity. It's the best conductor.
Absolutely.
So we'll never replace that.
Absolutely.
So our trains will always get their electricity from that copper. So from that point of view, but
absolutely.
also you don't want to plow a lot of money monitoring thieves.
It's surveillance that you're talking about.
The
Yes.
surveillance,
Yes.
the vastness of our network, it's coast to coast in the country. So there's no way you will have enough cameras to monitor that. But
Agreed.
coming back to the issue of the government doing enough, in my view is that because this is an international issue. Americans, the Europeans have got the same problem. And we are lobbying now with the government saying, can you make this a precious metal?
Yes.
So that very few people are allowed to deal in it. If they are, it's well regulated.
Sounds like they should have done this long ago if it's been a problem for such a long time, Errol.
Well, again, look, it's interesting looking at your graph there, but just to give you a sense, about 3,000 tons of copper is exported every year out of South African ports, okay? Now, South Africa doesn't produce 3,000 tons of copper. But what makes it difficult is that a lot of copper that is mined in Zambia gets transported through South Africa and exported from our ports. So it's not as easy as just looking at the ports.
Sure.
But I'm on record as saying that, to me, the theft of copper cable in particular should be viewed as economic sabotage.
Yes.
It's that serious.
We are
it's that
saying-
We
important.
agree with that.
Although
You
that's
know,
not the intention. I'm not defending them at all, but it's not their intention. Their intention is simply to steal it. It's not to
Yes,
sabotage.
but the
it.
effect, the consequential
Consequential
damage
damage.
to the
What
economy.
effect would it have if it was declared that?
Well, I think, Peggy's already mentioned the Second-Hand Goods Act, and of course we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. That's a very good start. But I can tell you that, you have to make the consequence of this crime so serious that it's probably second only to terrorism before you can think that you're going to start stamping it out. This is not a problem that you can...
Everyone's clearly nodding here. Peggy, is it going to happen? I mean, it's one thing to have high penalties. You've still got to catch them.
The rate of arrests and prosecutions is certainly increasing. And this is since the profile of the seriousness of the theft has actually been raised. So we are on the way there. I think we've still got a long way to go. And I don't think we're ever going to stamp it out completely. Because if you have a look at, we get requests for trade, international trade, and I get numerous requests in my inbox for used metals.